Hello, I'm Chris. This is Gross Models. Welcome to issue 119 of Building the Batman Tumbler, the penultimate issue. In this issue, we're finishing the underside of the build, shall we say. Muscle Car, this is from the Batman, isn't it? The most relatable hero in the comic book universe. Yeah, everyone's a multi-billionaire and gadgets and stuff and, really fit. Yeah, obviously. Everyone's exactly the same as him. Absolute Batman. I don't know about that. 2024 in partnership with Scott Snyder. Splitting the universe into two. The classic world we've known for many years. The more sinister cosmos steeped in nihilism and centered around the malevolent influence of Darkseid. Okay. All about that if you want to read about those. Very Stormtrooper-ish. Anyway, right, so here we go. This is what we've got to do. We've got to take a bit apart and put in an extra cable. Now, I'm not going to do that, and I shall tell you for why. The reason that you have to do this is because they built it wrong in the first place. The way they had it, the steering didn't work. So what they've actually done is brought in a cable that switches the polarity on, I assume, the motors or something. Yeah, it'd be one motor that does the steering. So they switch the polarity of that. So when you push left, it goes left instead of going right. But I've already taken it mostly apart and corrected the problem in a different way. The problem was when you push left, it went right, but it was still looking for the input on the left switch to stop it going. So it would never stop because it would just keep going, assuming it's not there yet, and exactly the same going the other way. So what I did was reversed the sensors. So the left sensor is now the right sensor, and the right sensor is now the left sensor. So when you push left, it does still go right, but it does stop when it gets to the right, and the same with the left. So if I put that in, then it will mean when you push left, it goes left, but it will never stop. And I'm not taking it all apart again because it's quite involved getting to the bit of that, especially now I've put even more on top of it. So mine works properly in that it turns left and right. It just means pushing the opposite button on the remote to make it do that. But that's the slightest problem. I'm almost certainly, once I've tested it all out, I'm not likely to push a button ever again anyway. So I'm not worried about doing that. So I'm not going to use that cable. I'm not going to get that apart. What I will be doing in this part of the build is basically putting the cover in place and buttoning it all up. Yeah, let's clear the bench. Let's get that done. Okay, so our final package contains the stands, which I'm not going to be using. I've got the tape because we need that for a bit later on anyway. JM screws, I'm not sure what we need them for yet, but we have got the double-sided tape, which is just one big blob of it. And we've got our 3 pairs of aerials. So the first one it says to do is this one. So we're going to cut that off of the sprue there and there. Don't need anything else doing on that. And then I need a piece of this. So let's get a knife. So this is going to go on the right side underneath. So the tape's going to go over that bit there. So I just need a bit of tape that long. And twice that wide because I need it for 2 of them eventually. So that bit, tweezers will be useful for that. They'll probably do it. So this is going to go underneath there. So that's going to go on there. Like that. Then I can peel off the backing tape. to reveal just a single bit of sticky. And that is going to go onto here. It's going on there, on the underside of that. I can find it again. It's around here somewhere. There it is. There it isn't. There it is. So that just goes under there. Pointing backwards. A bit like that. So there we go. We've got that attached to there. The others obviously go one on there, and the same on the other side. I'll get those attached now, and then we'll come back and look at the cockpit assembly, because you don't need to see me do this bit. This is fairly boring. Okay, there we go. All the antennas attached. It's not the best way of attaching things, but it does the job, I guess. I might try gluing them if they wobble too much, but other than that, they're fine. It's all decorative, isn't it? Next up, I've got this cockpit assembly to sort out. I've got all these wires to plug in. Now, that's the easy bit. Then there's a whole thing about connecting up stuff to the post. So let me wire up all of these. There's 8 plugs I've got here, all nicely labelled as they are on these. That's 26 on that one. And I've got all the wires coming out here, a big ribbon cable full of them, as well as a couple of spares. So let me get all those wired up, and we'll leave that sort of up there while I do that. And then it's just a case of figuring out how this extra post is going to fit down into there. There's a whole thing about having it turned off at the time. So let me get the wires plugged in, and then we'll move from there. Right, that's all the wires plugged in and sorted out. Then we've got some confusing things to do. We've got to get this bit, which the spring was slightly out of. I've re-glued that together, but that's now working as intended with the little clip thing. We've got to get 2 screws out from in there, which hold a bracket in place, which are one there and one there. So let me get those both out. I think nothing will actually work yet with the cockpit because there's a switch that hasn't been engaged to tell it that it's in position. So I've got to take this off of there. Okay. Then this has got to go in that hole. That way round with the... So that will basically enable it to go in, as far as I can tell, all the way down. It does say if it doesn't line up, you might need to adjust it with a screwdriver, but that's definitely engaged with that tooth. So I need to make sure it is engaged, but with enough room to let me get in. But basically, I've got to get that in and all the way down. And once it's down, I can turn things on and see if it works. So let me get in close so I can see what I'm doing with that and see if that gets engaged, because that means that once that's pushed in, you're not going to get it back out again. So I need to make sure I get that right. Is that... So that is engaging with that, but it's not actually turning that. And I'm pretty sure it needs to turn that for this to work. So I'll double check the instructions, make sure that goes in right. Hopefully I'll then get this all the way in and I'll be back in just a sec. Okay, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is it mostly works. The bad news is it doesn't completely work. That post has gone in there, but didn't want to move with any power connections or anything else. Nothing was doing anything. So I've basically left that in there and not screwed that onto there. But it's obviously doing something because the canopy bit works in one way. It doesn't work both ways. So yeah, this is not attached, but because everything is where it should be, it does now fit. If I get the wires out of the way, it fits on there did fit on there. Wonder why it's not fitting on there again now. No, I've put the cover on again since I've done that. Maybe that's getting in the way. I might take that cover back off. Yeah, because that seems to be preventing this from going in there properly without that being lined up. But yeah, so I'm going to take that cover back off of there again, the bit that I had to take off to get the bracket in. Yeah, I'll play with that. But that now locates on there and fits in sort of as it should, if I can get it lined up properly. So that does go in there okay, and it looks nice when it's all together. And if I press the cockpit button, the noise happens and this bit moves. Oh, if I can. So that bit sort of folds up and pulls back in. So with that engaged on there, you can then sort of see in, and obviously the internal cockpit lights will activate, and that using the remote, but it won't close again because there's obviously something not telling it that this bit's opened. But if you turn the power off, then when you turn the power on, everything sort of defaults to its standard, which means that the lights come on and that comes out and closes. So I can have it in its normal position, all locked up and looking good. And if I want to open the cockpit, I can do that. I'm not going to screw this together, so I can still lift this off to see the internals if I ever want to. It's unlikely I'll ever want to, but I'll tidy up the cables, as they say, to wire them up together to get them sort of tucked out the way a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that would only come up to there and that would go backwards anyway, so you wouldn't be able to see very much of the internals with that attached anyway. But I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do, the one other thing that doesn't work, all the lights turn on and off, as you can't see from here, the big spotlighty things there. The spoilers don't work properly, but they never did. Oh, that was the afterburner. That light comes in and does that. Let's turn that back off again. The steering does it, as I say, but reversed. The spoilers do their spoily thing in one direction, but when it goes the other way, again, it doesn't quite engage. Something is not triggering properly. So once again, you have to turn that off to stop that doing the annoying clicking noise. Something was obviously not quite home and the rotation's not quite with it. The number of times it's been turned over and taken apart, I'm not shocked. But as this is pretty much going to be a static model anyway, that doesn't bother me. So let me get things lined up, get that bracket back off of there so this will actually fit back in there nicely flush. I'll get some pictures and video of it completed and the bits of it that working. But other than that, another build is completed, mostly okay. It's quite lovely. It's huge and massive and heavy. But yeah, the bits that I'm not surprised that working aren't working, but I'm not surprised at those. All in all, it's been a very good build. I'm happy with it. As a shelf piece, it looks lovely. I say I'll show you the pictures and video in a moment, but for now, I'm going to call it a night. So thank you very much for watching the build. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you for another build soon, but I'll leave you now with some looks at the pictures and video of this in action and in action. But thank you very much for joining me in this adventure. I'll see you soon for other builds. Bye bye for now.